It's that time of year again, and I'm in a similar situation to last year where I didn't get a chance to see every new release. I'm not the kind of person that goes to see anything and everything that comes out. As much as I love going to the cinema, you won't be catching me spending money to see Shazam 2. Also, a lot of the films I haven't seen simply haven't been released in the UK yet, which is endlessly frustrating. But here's the list of films that could have potentially made the list had I seen them. If a film isn't on this list or in my list, then assume I've seen it and probably didn't like it. If you want my full ranking, the link will be in the description below. My 20th favourite film of 2023 was Air. Not a great film and barely a good one, but it's perfectly serviceable. At 19 is Paul Schrader's Master Gardener. Again, didn't love this one, but it has some interesting ideas and some sturdy direction. At 18 I have Asteroid City, one of the only Wes Anderson films I haven't truly got on board with. Too much artifice for my taste, but it's one of the best shot films of the year. At 17 is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, my favourite animated film to come out of Hollywood this year. At 16 is Sick, one of the better slashers of recent years. At 15 is Past Lives, a really strong debut film from Celine Song. At 14 is Blackberry. At 13 is Priscilla, one of the most tense and uncomfortable watches of the year. At 12, one of the most surprising films of the year, which is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Just a really good time, endlessly charming and funny. And at 11 is Knock at the Cabin, another great film from M. Night Shyamalan, who's one of my favourite directors, and this might be his best since Unbreakable.
Are you okay? I'm trying to get away from this mountain!
I'm a sucker for the Mission Impossible series. I love all of them but 3, and sometimes 2, and Dead Reckoning didn't disappoint, for the most part. It definitely feels like a step down from the highs of Fallout, which to me is one of the best action films of the last 20 years, but I'm just not a huge fan of how this film looks. It's the first of the franchise to be shot digitally, which I can kind of understand considering the story, but it just means the film really lacks texture and depth, and it looks its worst during its exposition scenes, where there's a big reliance on off-kilter angles and close-ups, which aren't inherently bad. The best scene in the franchise plays out in a similar way from the first Mission Impossible. But here it feels messy and uncoordinated, like they didn't know how these shots would play in relation to one another. But besides that, the film does exactly what it sets out to do, which is create nail-biting, edgy-to-seat set pieces, and it delivers in the highest fashion. I said it last year with Top Gun Maverick, and I'll say it again for Dead Reckoning, but Tom Cruise's dedication to stunt work and creating the best possible cinematic experience for the audience is something that I'll always be grateful for, and I'll always turn up to watch. I think Cruise gives an incredible physical performance and an almost equal comedic one. His chemistry and timing with the rest of the cast, particularly Hayley Atwell, makes it so fun to watch. McQuarrie has really settled on the exposition set piece back and forth, which just propels you from beat to beat. The exposition is delivered so economically, it basically comes down to someone having a thing, and now everyone needs to get that thing, and then Tom Cruise runs after that thing, and I was just on board the entire time. At this point, if Hunt needed to get anything, I'd be there with him clapping him on. And whilst I don't like how the dialogue scenes were shot, I think McQuarrie has such a good handle on how to shoot and edit the action sequences. He's really stepped up as a director with each new film. The car chase in Rome is such a well-constructed set piece that is constantly thrilling and funny, and the whole final act train sequence is one of the highs of the entire franchise.
I think there are a lot of things that we haven't talked about in a long time.
May December might be the weirdest film I saw this year. It's definitely one of the most uncomfortable watches I've had in a while, where I simultaneously wanted to turn it off every 5 seconds, but was also desperate to know more about what happened in these people's lives. I was basically shocked the entire time that this film even functions as well as it does, because Todd Haynes walks a really fine line with the film because the tone is so variable. It has some of the darkest and most disturbing material all year, but it's not afraid to poke fun at how ridiculous the situation is, which could easily make the film fall apart and make it feel like it's not treating the topic with enough severity. But somehow it works, and I found myself completely consumed in the dynamics of the characters and the journalistic elements of finding out about their history. I'm generally not a fan of Natalie Portman as an actress, but she's the best she's ever been here, and all 3 of the central performances are so compelling, and the script is so good at slowly peeling back the layers enough to then let you put the pieces together. It's a great story about how we exploit trauma for stories and art, And the film is so clever in how it reflects it straight back at the audience, to the point where you feel guilty for even being invested in what's happening, because it's just so horrific to watch.
You know, you got nice color skin. What color would you say that is?
Killers of the Flower Moon was one of my most anticipated films of the year, not only because it's a new Scorsese film and he's one of the greatest directors of all time, but I also went into the film having read David Grann's incredible book, which Scorsese was adapting, which I'd recommend to everyone, regardless of your thoughts on the film. It's always strange having read the book before it's been portrayed, because before you even watch the film, you've already built up an expectation of what you're going to see, and I think this definitely impacted the way I felt about the film. I have only seen it once, so I do probably need to see it again, but I had a problem with the perspective through which the story was told. The book isn't tied to one specific point of view, but I think framing the film's events through Ernest Burkhart rather than Molly hurts the film in my opinion, from what I found so engaging about the book, which was the mystery and paranoia surrounding the events. But I completely get why Scorsese shifts the perspective. His whole career has been built on making the audience come face to face with evil, but I feel like Ernest is too passive of a character to lead the film, and it means that Molly and the Osage get sidelined for a large part of the runtime, when really it's their story and perspective that matters. Lily Gladstone's performance is too good for her to be absent for as long as she is in the film, but in saying that, the film was still amazing and devastating to watch. And I'm so happy that in the latter stages of his career, Scorsese is still out there making films this introspective and this important. The film is so unflinching in its depictions, and Scorsese's more restrained style of filmmaking that he's grown into for his last few films really forces you to sit and contemplate the horrors on screen. My flaws with the film merely stop it from being the best of the year, which I felt it could have been, as opposed to the 8th best film of the year. And I think it's a miracle that something of this scale, budget and quality even exists in today's climate.
You blame me for his death?
Yes! Yes, because you promised me he wouldn't die!
Michael Mann is in my top 2 or 3 favourite filmmakers working today, so I was very excited to see him return with a new film after however many years it's been since Black Hat, which is one of my favourites of his. And whilst I can say Ferrari doesn't reach the heights of Mann's films within the crime genre, it's still another really well made film within a ridiculously good filmography. I'm pretty interested in cars and I follow motorsport pretty closely, so this film was already within my ballpark of interests, but in general I can't think of a film about cars or motorsports that I've loved or even liked. They're normally pretty bad, but Mann manages to find a way into this story through what has always been at the heart of his films, which is the highly obsessive professionals that he can't help but relate to. There's 2 sides to Ferrari which Mann constantly switches between and interweaves with one another. There's the melodrama between Ferrari and Laura and the pent-up grief that they're holding against one another, and then there's the visceral, high-intensity racing. Both aspects to Ferrari's life are engaging and exciting, but they don't always work off each other as much as I would have liked. I often found myself wanting to return to the other, but in general it's done very well. The reason the melodrama is as interesting to watch as it was is because the 2 central performances from Adam Driver and Penelope Cruz are so hard to take your eyes off. They get into these loud Italian outbursts that are as thrilling as any race. But it is the racing where you feel Mann is at his best. The editing and the sound design makes for some really exciting sequences. There's a moment in the film which had me jaw open, silent. You could hear a pin drop in my screening. I really liked this one, but I hope Mann returns to the crime genre after this. We're all begging for Heat 2, Michael, now's the time. After the snooze fest of Mank, I'm really happy Finch is back working with the pulpy material he built his career on. The Killer is by no means his best film, and it almost took me aback on first viewing with just how unambitious the script is, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a very solid thriller that knows exactly what it is and plays to its strengths with some really tense sequences. The film is a pastiche of so many great films that I love, most notably The Samurai, and I really loved how Fincher takes these influences and puts them through a contemporary setting to show the mundanity of living in the modern age. There's nothing flashy or cool about the killer. He eats McDonald's, orders his tools off Amazon and disguises as a UPS guy, and when he's not doing that, he's dressed in a bucket hat. And it's all these little moments that make the film so enjoyable and funny. And it is a funny film, easily one of the funniest of the year. Hearing the killer's inner monologue about sticking to the plan and not caring whilst listening to the Smiths, and then he goes on to do the complete opposite of those things. It's peak comedy to me. Fincher's style lends itself so well to these sort of stories, particularly when the protagonist is basically a mirror image of how he goes about directing. The camera work is so precise, and I hope other directors take note of how Fincher shoots in these low light conditions, because he really is one of the best at it. The film was also one of the best edited films of the year, particularly in its opening 20 minutes, which patiently presents the killer to you through his weird little monologues. It also has one of the best fight scenes of 2023 in a year where we got Mission Impossible and John Wick films. It's so brutal, and the sound design is really well done too, which really adds weight and aggression to the choreography. I really want to see Fincher keep making these kind of films, and I actually wouldn't mind a sequel to this one.
Samuel had no enemies. That
Stop. I did not kill him.
At the start of Anatomy of a Fall, the film sets itself up to be a rather standard, if interesting, murder mystery procedural, which is the type of film I love and would have been happy watching, but as the film develops you realise this is anything but standard. It really finds a unique place within the genre, by how it places you with the prime and only suspect of the case, whilst also not revealing to you their innocence or guilt. You'd expect this type of film to be told from the lawyer's point of view or someone that has no direct relation to the mystery itself, but the film is so good at playing with the ambiguity and limited nature of subjectivity, and it makes for such a thrilling courtroom drama which had me on edge the entire runtime. The film has some of the best performances of the year, particularly from Sandra Hüller and the child actor whose name I don't know, but they add this incredible sense of realism to the film, which Justine Triet's direction really enhances by how she keeps a very objective view of the trial. There's a lack of flashbacks or visualizations of evidence, barring one of the film's best scenes involving an argument, but otherwise Triet keeps you at arm's length about the legitimacy of information, which keeps you fixed on every word said, and it makes you question every account of the case. It's a really impressive film, and I can see this being higher on my list after another watch.
What exactly are you?
To see a new Hayao Miyazaki film in a packed cinema screening in 2023 was such a memorable experience that I'll cherish for a long time. If you've seen my videos, you'll know he's one of my favourite filmmakers, and The Boy and the Heron is another unforgettable display of his imagination, and I loved every second of it. I have only seen it once, so I feel like I'm not quite able to put all the pieces together of this because there is so much going on visually and creatively. I'm not really sure what to make of the army of parakeets and the marshmallow looking things that fly up and get eaten by pelicans, but there are just so many delightful twists and turns that just had me in awe of what I was seeing on screen. It goes without saying, but the animation is stunning, and Miyazaki continues to show why 3D animation will never be able to capture the sense of life and character that hand-drawn 2D animation does. I love all the character designs and the dreamlike imagery. I just found myself trying to take in every detail, and whilst I might not get what it's all about, in a way it doesn't really matter because the emotion was all there, so I'll figure it out somewhere down the line like I have with all of his films.
I can't fail this class.
Oh, don't sell yourself short, Mr. Coates. I truly believe that you can.
The Holdovers still hasn't been released in the UK yet, despite it being a Christmas film, so I had to find alternative methods of watching it, considering all the praise I'd heard. And yeah, it's an amazing film, and an instant Christmas classic that I can see myself watching every year. I've seen it twice already, and I could return 100 times more just to be with these characters and live in this cozy aesthetic of the film. Paul Giamatti is so good. I've always loved him as an actor, but this is far and away his best performance, and maybe one of my favourite performances ever, honestly. He's so funny and so endearing, whilst also being this grumpy old teacher who you kind of hate, but love at the same time. It's such a great physical performance. It's so funny just watching him plod around the school grounds, and his face is just made for close-ups. I don't have all that much to say about it. It's just a really nice film that feels like it's wrapping you in a big warm blanket with a hot chocolate, only to then hit you in the head with its emotional payoffs in the third act. If you're in the UK, don't miss this one when it comes out.
John? Kane.
I've always regretted the fact that I never got a chance to see some of my favourite action spectacles in the cinema, like Fallout or Fury Road, but I can safely say I was there for this one, which almost makes up for it. I did a video on the John Wick series earlier in the year, and whilst I mostly echo those thoughts now, months later, they don't really hold up for John Wick 4 because the film is just on another level of quality. Seeing it was one of the best theatrical experiences I've ever had. I was just mouth open the entire time in awe at what I was seeing, My flaws with the previous entries mainly revolve around the gun fu action, which I've always found quite repetitive, but Stahelski in John Wick 4 finds variety in every single set piece. Whether it's location, weapons, the antagonists, the cinematography, all of it feels fresh. And I was hesitant of the near-on 3-hour runtime, but the film just gets better and better as it goes on. Every set piece is bigger and better than the last. It's such an impressive piece of work from Stahelski, who has improved as a director with each instalment. Not only with the choreography, but the whole look of the film is dripping with neon colours and gorgeous compositions. Similar to Mission Impossible, both films find a perfect balance of comedy and silliness. It's such a funny film when it wants to be, like seeing Keanu Reeves get run over like 3 times in a row and fall downstairs will never not be funny to me. The stair sequence in general is just one of my favourite scenes of the whole year, and it's only like the 3rd best set piece in the film. Keanu is great in the film, but the real stars are the side characters for me. Scott Adkins and Donnie Yen steal the show and really set the standard for the choreography. Anytime they're on screen, especially Donnie Yen, I was mesmerised by the speed and ease at which they carried out the action. Stahelski finds such interesting characteristics and dynamics to make them stand out, and I just think the film is a landmark in Western action films, and one of the best to come out of Hollywood, particularly in the last 20 years. And it was my favourite film of the year for a good few months, but that changed pretty quickly in July.
You drop a bomb and it falls on the just and the unjust. I don't wish the culmination of 3 centuries of physics to be a weapon of mass destruction.
This shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone who knows me or anyone who watched my last video, because I haven't stopped talking or thinking about Oppenheimer since I first saw it. It's comfortably my favourite film of the year, and I'm normally quite hesitant when it comes to saying a new release is amongst my favourites of all time, but how can I not feel that way? I've seen it 7 times, and I could watch it 7 times more and still be swept up in the story as I was on first viewing. It's really exciting to see someone like Nolan, who in the past has made plenty of very good films that I've enjoyed, make such a big step up in his career. Tenet has always been my favourite Nolan, and I love it so much, but if we're comparing it to Oppenheimer, it's night and day. Oppenheimer is the kind of film I didn't think Nolan had it in him to make, but at the same time, it's a film that only Nolan could have made. It's a 3-hour biopic, yet it's as propulsive and fast-paced as any of Nolan's sci-fi extravaganzas. The structure and editing of this thing blows my mind every time I watch it. It really is a 1 + 1 equals something more than 2 in how Nolan crosscuts between all these different events and perspectives. I get how some people could find it confusing or hard to keep up, but personally I just got swept along in its editing rhythms. The performances across the board are incredible. Robert Downey Jr., Jason Clarke and Cillian Murphy were the standouts for me, and Murphy's performance is so understated and so well realised, and the whole film basically hinges on his performance because so much of it plays out in huge close-ups of his face. Nolan manages to make the film massive in scale, whilst also extremely intimate, using the IMAX format to not just capture spectacle, but also the human face, and it's all down to Murphy that it's as effective as it is. I think there's definitely a version of this film that would have ended with the Trinity test, but the way in which Nolan explores the consequences and psyche following Oppenheimer's actions was something I never expected from him, and it makes for some of the most harrowing sequences I've seen in a long time. The last hour is a phenomenal piece of courtroom drama. The dialogue and the editing are so electric. I can't tell you how many times I've revisited the scene where Nolan cuts between Strauss losing the vote and Roger Robb interrogating Oppenheimer. It's just an incredible piece of filmmaking, and the ending at the lake leaves a pit in my stomach every time. I just love the entire thing so much. I could sing the film's praises all day. I haven't even spoken about the score or a whole number of reasons as to why it's my favourite film of the year. It's always hard talking about the films you like, because normally the reasons are just the whole piece, everything, not necessarily 1 or 2 specific things. But I really think Oppenheimer is one of the best of the 21st century so far, and one of my favourites I've ever seen. But most importantly, it's my pick for the best film of 2023. So that's my list. Let me know your top 10 or just your favourite if you can't decide. But before I end the video, I'll do a quick 2024 awards segment for my personal picks for certain Oscar categories. I won't do them all just to save time, but Best Actor, Cillian Murphy. Best Supporting Actor, Robert Downey Jr. Best Actress, Sandra Hüller. Best Supporting Actress, Penelope Cruz. Best Director, Christopher Nolan. Best Original Screenplay, Past Lives. Best Adapted Screenplay, Oppenheimer. cinematography, Oppenheimer. Editing, Oppenheimer. Original score, say it with me, Oppenheimer. Sound design, Oppenheimer. Production design, Asteroid City. And Best Picture, Oppenheimer. And yeah, have a good one.
I love my popcorn. Movies, popcorn.